lifetime. I want you, Simon.
Simon, the classic memory game made popular back in the 1980s. The premise is simple. The device shows you a random sequence using 4 different colors, and you just have to repeat that sequence. But every time you do so successfully, the sequence gets longer.
Thank you, Simon.
And naturally, over Minecraft's 15-year history, several people have tried to recreate it using Redstone. In 2019, I was personally inspired to try my hand at it from an episode of Etho's Let's Play that had come out a few years earlier. And, after a few months of working, this is what I had come up with. This was by far the most complex redstone machine I had ever made at this point, and all things considered, I think I did a pretty good job making the redstone compact, especially for 2019. Fast forward to 2022, and redstone YouTuber Crafty Masterman put out this video showing off
the smallest Simon game ever made in Minecraft.
And yeah, this thing is really small, especially just the bare bones needed to make it function. And with Simon being a huge part of my own redstone journey, I took this as inspiration to revisit my own design. So I built a whole new design from the ground up and had it done in less than a week. And here it is, Simon 2.0. Far more compact than my first design, and complete with game sounds, a score counter, and an optional timer system. Not only that, but I also made a gambling machine variant, where you have to pay to play, but you can win diamonds back depending on how well you do. And with the interface on top of the machine, it's very survival friendly to play, and you can just hide all of the redstone underground. But I also specifically designed the redstone so it would fit perfectly inside of this cube, which is how I chose to display it on the server I play on. So, to start the game, simply hit this button in the center. Then, after a moment, it will display the first color in the sequence. When the light in the middle turns on, that indicates when it's your turn to input the sequence. And you'll hear a chime sound when you get it right. Then that middle light turns off, and it will display the sequence again, this time with another random color added to the end. Now, unfortunately, it isn't spam-proof. If you press the buttons too fast, it will cause the system to fail. So a general rule of thumb is to try to play the pattern at the same speed that it displays it, or whenever a button press comes up, that's when you can press the next one. Now every time you complete a sequence, a point is added to your score, which is displayed in this shulker back here. This effectively shows the longest sequence, and it can go all the way up to 52 before capping. And if you ever put in an incorrect input, you'll hear a failure sound, and the system will go into reset mode. And then after about 25 seconds, you'll hear a chime sound, and the system will be completely reset and ready to play again. And even when the system resets, your score will stay in the shulker. But whenever you start a new game, it will clear that score very quickly because of a hopper minecart below the shulker. Now, as mentioned before, I also added an optional timer system to the game, which you turn on with this lever. The purpose for this is to try to add a little bit of an extra challenge. Basically, whenever the timer is active, it puts pressure on you by forcing you to keep making inputs. If you ever pause during your turn and don't press a button for more than 3 seconds, it will count that as a fail and end the game. So that covers all the features from the main version. But I know a lot of you out there like redstone gambling machines, and so in an effort to capitalize on the YouTube algorithm, I turned this into one. So in this version, pressing the startup button on its own doesn't do anything. That is until you give it a diamond block, which you do by putting in the same shulker where you get your score. And now, it will start up like normal. And then you just play the game like normal, and now, every time you complete a sequence, you'll get a diamond back in the score shulker. This means, in order to make your money back, you need to string together a sequence of at least 9, which is at least moderately challenging, I'd say. And in order to keep the pressure on the players, I just removed the optional part of the timer system in this version, so it is always running and will end the game if you're not quick enough. But if a sequence of 9 proves to be too easy, then you can just mess around with the items in the payout dropper to lower the rates and even add some randomness to the diamonds that they get. And currently, I have all of the diamond blocks that you input feeding into a crafter down here, which will convert them into diamonds and feed them right back into the payout dropper. But you could just as easily swap this out for a barrel if you want to separate the payment from the payout. And if you need more backstock for your payout, you can just put a hopper there. And there you go, not one, but two compact versions of Simon with some cool extra features. But what makes my newer version so much more compact from my first one? Well, most of the earlier versions of Simon, my own included, use physical space to store the memory of the sequence. In my case, I came up with this sort of hopper chain that stores exactly one item per hopper, meaning that each slot in the memory takes up a 1-block slice. And then of course you could just keep building this out to extend the maximum sequence. But in his video, Crafty showed off this sort of minecart chest swapping system that stored the sequence memory as stackable and unstackable items in the minecart inventories, an idea that he got from another Simon design by a player named Narcoleptic Frog. This allowed for sequences of up to 27 without adding any extra bulk to the build. But it was actually something else from Crafty's video that inspired how I would design my version. I thought, why not just store the sequence as shulker boxes? You see, by putting different amounts of unstackable items in the shulker boxes, we can read different signal strengths from them using comparators. And because shulker boxes don't stack, we can maintain the order of the sequence in a double chest, meaning we can store a pattern of up to 54 this way. But I settled on a maximum of 52 for this build, because that's 13 of each color. Look, I never said the build was resource friendly. So when the sequence is being played, the shulkers are dispensed and read by a comparator before being broken by a piston. That comparator feeds the signal strength into this red coder, which will power one of 4 redstone torches based on the output from the shulker. And those are hooked up to each of the 4 colors in the display, along with some note blocks. After being displayed, the shulker boxes get moved into this second memory storage chest, and the first one in the sequence gets dispensed right here, which is also being read by a comparator. At this point, the player can begin pushing the buttons, which all output different signal strengths onto this redstone line down below. That gets fed into this comparator, which is subtracted by the contents of the shulker box. As long as the input is correct, it will output a signal strength of exactly 1 onto this redstone line, which will cause this piston to break the shulker and the next one will be placed. Then the shulkers go up the bubble column and feed right back into the first memory chest for the next round. But if the input is ever wrong, the signal strength will be too long or too short, which will get detected and cause the game to end. Now, when you successfully complete a sequence, the system is going to pull a random new shulker from this shuffler system, which is going to go up that same bubble column and feed right into the chest at the end of the sequence. Now this shuffler system is a lot like the one I showed off in my card table video. Basically, the shulkers get circulated around in this loop of droppers and mixed up really well. So then by the time it pulls a shulker from the first slot of this dropper, it could really be any color. And so this isn't exactly a perfect 4-way randomizer. It's actually a lot more like drawing from a deck of cards, but it really doesn't affect the gameplay experience, and it saves a lot of space because we don't have to sort out the different colored shulkers when the game goes into reset mode. And when the game does go into reset mode, it will unlock a couple of hoppers that open up a direct line feeding from both memory chests straight down into the shuffler, completely clearing the system of all of the shulkers. And that covers most of the main functionality. The rest of the machine handles things like startup, switching between display, input, and reset modes, and things like the scoring and timer systems. And it's all densely packed redstone spaghetti, which has become something of a staple of my builds. And real quick, I want to show a bit of love to my first design. I'm still very proud of this one to this day. It has the same features as my newer design with the timer and the scoring system, and it actually runs faster and smoother than my newer design and can handle faster inputs from the player. It's also entirely silent aside from the note blocks, with no extra pistons or dropper sounds going off. And I also think the mechanism by which this works is really cool. Basically, it uses this dynamic item filter, which pulls the different colored wool blocks one at a time from the hopper chain I showed off earlier to set the filter. Then it checks the player input using the filter, and if it goes through, it clears both of the wool and sets the filter with the next color. So anyway, all 3 of my designs will be available in a world download as well as individual schematics linked down in the description. And lastly, I want to say that this video is not meant to compare my design to Crafty's or anyone else's. And with that said, there have been a couple other super awesome and compact designs to come out in the past couple years. And I think sometimes we get hung up on who did something first or who did it best. But to me, the beauty of Redstone is that the same problem can be approached so many different ways, and they all hold value and deserve to be celebrated. But anyway, if you enjoyed the video, leave a like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.